Bonjour, bonjour. Bonjour Baffen, bonjour Nora, bonjour Sabrina, bonjour Joe. Ça va?
Bien, ça va?
Ça va, merci. Ok. Bonjour Félix.
Bonjour,
Ça
ça
va?
va? Oui, ça va.
Super, super. Ok.
Bonjour, Adriel.
Bonjour Sabrina, ça va?
Ça va bien.
Ça va, super. Okay. So we'll still wait for a couple minutes for everybody to join. Okay. And we'll be able to start as soon as 1 p.m. or 5, yeah, that's okay with you. And then we'll be able to start. Okay. Bonjour Bella.
Bonjour,
Ça va?
ça va bien, merci.
Super. Ok. Bonjour Kira. Ça va? Hey. Well, ça va Kara? Uh, yeah. No problem, Felix. Okay. Just feel free to go before the class ends whenever you need to go. Okay, no problem for that. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you for warning me, Kara. Okay. Okay, we'll be starting off today since most of you have joined. Okay. Um, so I'm going to share my screen right away and we'll be able to start today's class, okay? So last time we talked about more in general about yourself, okay? Well, yourselves, and how we were talking about hobbies and sports. How would you express those things in French, okay? So how would you say, for example, that you play a certain sport, how you do a certain activity, okay? We also talked a little bit about expressing your tastes. So with, for example, we saw the verbs aimer in French and the verb adorer, okay? We also saw the verb détester, okay? So again, for those of you who can make it to last class, we're going to talk about it a little bit in detail to start the class, okay? So no worries about that. Um, so again, the objectives of this class is that we are going to review both genders, so feminine and masculine. Um, More specifically, we're going to talk about, well, the feminine and masculine and how it kind of interferes with the adjective, okay? So this little part is going to be a bit new for you since most of you are English speakers and adjectives aren't gendered, okay? We're still going to review the expression of taste and hobbies, and also we're going to learn about, well, numbers. So we did like 0 to 10 approximately. So now we're going to do, well, 0 to 100, and we're going to see how that kind of plays out, okay? Just a little point, like before we go to the numbers. It's almost the same thing as in English. So I think that in the construction and the way we express numbers, it would not be very hard, okay? And then we're going to talk about clothes and colors, okay? So here is the little timetable of today's class. So we're going to start off by reviewing, then we're going to move on to numbers, the clothes, okay? Donc les vêtements. And we're going to talk about colors, okay? All right. Okay, so we're going to start off as we did last time, okay? We're going to ask each other how we are doing today. So we're going to ask the question ça va, okay? Or comment ça va? You can ask both, okay? So it's basically the same thing. You can start off by ça va or comment ça va. Okay. So I'm going to start off, and then you'll ask someone else how they're doing, okay? Be mindful that Kara's microphone is not working, so maybe don't ask Kara, okay? Félix Nino, comment ça va?
Ça va bien, merci. Et toi?
Ça va très bien, merci. Est-ce que tu peux demander à quelqu'un d'autre? Can you ask someone else?
Bien
maybe?
sûr. Oui, oui, bah oui.
Merci.
Comment ça va, Bethan?
Ça va bien, merci. Joe, ça va?
Oui, ça va. Excellent.
Bonjour Bethan. Oui, ça va. Nora, comment ça va?
Ça va bien. Et toi?
Oui, ça va bien.
Euh, Sabrina, ça va?
Ça va bien, merci. Ça va, Félix?
So Felix has answered already, but Bella is still left, so you can ask Bella instead.
Comment ça va, Bella?
Ça va bien, merci.
Okay. Super. Très très bien. Okay, so we can move on to the reviewing of what we did last time. So some of you haven't been there last time, so we're going to start off again. Okay. Last time we talked about loisirs et sport. Okay. So les sports is the same thing as in English, okay? Just the different pronunciation. What's easy here, or what's different from English and French as in the pronunciation, is that we have two letters that are completely mute, okay? So the two final letters, we would simply say sport, okay? And what do you possibly think is loisir? What could it mean in English? Does anyone have an idea? Well, some of you who were bigger last time, you probably know, okay?
Your hobbies?
Hobbies, yeah. So, les loisirs is hobbies, okay. So it's almost the same thing as in English, where, for example, we have a game. So, for example, we take the example of a sport, okay? So for example, basketball. Basketball is viewed as a game. So if you were to kind of express if you're practicing this certain sport that is a game, you would use a verb, a specific verb, okay? Just like in English. For example, you would say, I do basketball. You would say, I play basketball. And well, that is the same thing as in French. So for example, instead of saying je fais du basket, okay, we would say je joue au basket, okay. What's very important in French is the use of those little words, okay, a, o, okay. Last time, so we talked about basically the genders of nouns, okay? Because common nouns are gendered in French. So for example, basketball, its gender of basketball is masculine. It's singular masculine. So for example, we would use that preposition, oh, okay? And if maybe the sport was, for example, a sport that is grammatically feminine, we would use a la, okay? So that's different. And if it was plural, we would use o with an X. So maybe Bethan, since you were there last time, could you remind us what's like the letter X? What does it like give as some sort of information about the noun that it precedes?
So you said that the X is the English equivalent of like an S. So
Yeah.
it means that it's plural. So if you see that there's an X on the end, it means that word must be plural.
Yeah. Très bien. Merci beaucoup. Exactly. So basically, the X is a mark of the plural, just as in English, for example, it would be the S. But in French, we also have the S as a mark of the plural. So it's basically when you see, for example, at the end of noun, an X or an S, you know that noun is plural, okay? So that is for the sports, okay? Be mindful of the preposition you would use here. So for example, at the, well, if it's a game, we would use joue, and then use those same prepositions. So either à la, au, or o, depending on the gender and the number of the sport, okay, of the noun that is following. But if we go into a sport that isn't a game, for example, escalade, doesn't everybody know what's escalade? No. So,
No, I don't know what it is.
okay, escalade is climbing. Okay. It's like there's some sort of a Latin root. That's why, for example, we have the word escalier in French, which is stairs. Okay. Same thing as maybe escalators in English. Okay. So there's that idea of climbing. Okay. So we know that climbing isn't a game, even though it's a sport. So instead of saying je joue, we would say je fais, okay? Je fais. And the difference between je fais and je joue, you can see here in the table, is the conjugation, which is kind of different. But again, we'll see a little bit later. What we're focusing on right now is the preposition that we use following, for example, the verb faire, okay? So basically same thing as in English. Faire is do. So basically the sentence in French would be I do climbing instead of I climb. Maybe you would say that in English. So here we have the preposition, we have du, de la, et des. So a little reminder, du is masculine, okay? De la is feminine, and des is plural. Can maybe someone remind me what's the gender of plural in French? Because even the plural has a gender in French.
Masculine.
It's masculine. So it's a little bit confusing at first because in English you have like a neutral gender. For example, with they, it's neutral. In English, well, in French, the plural tense is always masculine. It's like masculine is the neutral way of expressing a plural. If, for example, I think that we talked about it maybe 2 classes ago, for example, when we talked about like the pronouns. If you were, for example, if we take the example of a room and there's like one man and, well, several other women, even though like the women are just have more numbers, if we refer to that room, we would say il at the plural tense because there's a man and multiple women, so it's neutral, okay? But because the masculine is the neutral expression of the plural, it's kind of a strange rule in French. So we have that saying that is like the masculine always wins in some case, even though there's like one masculine noun or one masculine person and several other feminine nouns. Okay. So if we take a look at the table of conjugation, we can see that there's something that is very recurring, okay, in French conjugation, which isn't the case in English, for example. In English, we take the verbal base, okay, and it's kind of all the conjugation of the present, besides the thing that you kind of just put an S at the end of the third person. Here, in French, we have like a sort of way where we categorize different verbs. Okay, so we have 3 categories. It's very specific, but when you see the infinitive here, it's the infinitive version of the verb jouer. Okay, we can see the er, the er. Okay, so when you see a infinitive verb that ends with er, it would be considered as the first group. Okay, and the first group has a specific way of conjugating the verb. So for example, for the verbs of the first group, the terminaison, okay, so how you would end the verb. So you have the root of the verb. Here it's joue, okay? So for example, if we keep that joue, for the first group, we would just kind of do that here and here. Okay, So basically you can see here that instead of like taking the root, well, the verbal base, like in English, you would use that little root, okay? So here is joue, and then you would add a certain ending. So because the verb jouer is one of the first group, we know that at the first person it takes an E, at the second person it takes an E and an S, okay? And then later on, okay? So if we have another verb that starts or that ends with er, we would know how we would conjugate it just because it's a first group, okay? Because it ends with er, we would know that it starts with e, then es, etc. Does anybody kind of understand that rule for now? Bonjour Donna. Thanks for coming in today.
Bonjour, I'm sorry for being late.
Yeah, no problem. We were just reviewing what we did last time, so no worries. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And then we have faire. So as I've told you, faire is a listed in a different category of verbs, okay? So jouer was a first group, okay? And faire is in the third group. And because we know like how it conjugates, kind of, we just split that verb into two, and then we have the root, and we know how to conjugate it, etc. and etc. Okay, just something different here for the third person of the plural. Okay, so it's kind of an introduction to how conjugation works in French. But be mindful that for now, the only real pronouns and person that kind of interests us, okay, is the first one, the second one, and maybe the third one of the singular. So for now, it's not a big deal to know like the plural tense of a verb, okay? All right, so now we're going to kind of answer that questions. Et toi, tu fais quoi comme sport? Okay, so c'est quoi? Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? What does it mean? Tu fais quoi comme sport? What could it possibly mean?
You do how what sport? Something like that.
Well, it's close, so try to kind of rephrase it in English.
What sports do you do?
Yep, totally. What sports do you do? Because for example, if we take like the structure of a question in French, it's really different. So as you can see, we have the subject first, then we have the verb, and then we have like the following, or even like the question tag as a third word. Questions in French are much freer, if you could call it that, than English. English, it's kind of more specific, where would you would like have to use do to express a question most of the time. You would have to kind of invert the subject with the auxiliary, okay, or with a modal, okay. So basically, in French, it's much more simple, as we have seen, for example, with the question "ça va." What's really important here is to kind of accentuate, to kind of have that intonation that it really means a question. for example, instead of saying what sport do, you would say tu fais quoi comme sport? We're not obligated to have that inversion with the subject. We're not obligated to have the verb or the auxiliary do to ask a question. It's much more easy in some way. Okay. So tu fais quoi comme sport, Donna? If you do any sport.
Badminton.
Okay. Alors, badminton. On va essayer de faire une phrase. So we're going to try to make a whole sentence. So would you use the verb faire or jouer?
Jouer.
Jouer, yeah. So how could you kind of rephrase it?
Je joue au badminton.
Je joue au badminton. Très bien. Ok, merci. Tu pourrais demander à quelqu'un d'autre dans la classe? Could you ask someone else in the class?
The same, tu fais quoi comme sport?
Mhm.
Okay, so Bella, tu fais quoi comme sport?
Moi, je fais de la boxe.
Très bien. Ok.
Adriel, est-ce
Oui.
que c'est toujours de la D après faire et A, O après jouer? C'est comme ça?
Alors, en l'occurrence, so we're going to see more specifically in terms of, for example, as we saw 2 classes ago with the instruments.
Yeah.
For example, with the instruments, we saw that we had the verb jouer, okay? But we also had the preposition du, de la. For example, je joue de la guitare, okay? So it's not specific at that verb. It's kind of more specific about that activity, that sport, for example. Okay.
Okay.
So basically, if you would like kind of talk about an activity, which is a sportive activity, you would use faire, and then you would have those very same preposition, which will not move. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
De rien, de rien. Does anyone want to try and give it a go, or maybe you feel like you've understood the little review and we can move on, or any question maybe? Une question? Non, pas de question? Okay. Alors, on peut avancer. We can move on. Yep. So, as I've told previously to Bella, okay, we have, for example, with music. Okay. So when we talk about music in general, we would use a very important thing here is the verb jouer. So as I've told Bella previously, we would use the verb jouer. And I think it's the same thing in English. You would maybe say like, I play the piano, I play the guitar. You would always use the verb play, I believe, or I think in most instruments at least. What's important here again are the prepositions that follow the question, okay, or the sentence. For example, if we take the question, tu joues à quel instrument? Okay, so it's basic question. It's neutral here, okay? I've put like the S's in brackets because it can be plural as it can be singular, okay? But for the answer here, what we have to know and identify as soon as we can is the gender of your instrument. So again, there's no basic rule as to know what gender is a noun. It's just something that you have to know beforehand. Kind of like the irregular verbs in English, where there's no specific rule as to why there's this kind of variation. It's the same thing here. It's just, well, you're going to try and fail maybe and make mistakes, but that is okay. You just have to kind of improve on and kind of memorize that. For example, piano is a masculine noun. So we would use du, okay? And maybe someone wants to guess what gender we would use for guitar.
De la.
De la, ouais, ok, très bien. De la, parce que c'est féminin, because it's feminine. So la is another mark of the feminine. Same thing as in maybe Spanish. If you try to learn Spanish, for example, nouns have this kind of mark, as in, for example, every feminine noun ends with an A, and every masculine noun ends with an O. So we have that mark. Okay. Any question about that more specifically? No? Ok. So, je vais poser une question. Maybe Bethan, tu joues d'un instrument?
No.
Non, tu ne joues pas d'un instrument? Non? Ok. Est-ce que quelqu'un joue d'un instrument dans la classe?
Oh oui. Et non, tu joues d'un instrument?
Nora, Bethan asked you the question, so est-ce que tu joues d'un instrument?
I don't play an instrument, so how do I say negative?
So it would be like, it's very important. It's kind of the same pattern as in English, where we have the ne pas, okay? So it would kind of add to that same sentence, je ne joue pas. Okay. So we have
Okay.
the affirmation where we have to add ne pas. Okay. Je ne joue pas d'un instrument. But French is, again, something that is kind of free. And most people would simply say, je joue pas d'un instrument. Because, like languages, the same thing as in English, languages tend to simplify themselves with time. It's kind of the evolution of language. So for example, here you could say je ne joue pas d'un instrument. It's kind of more formal, okay? But it would be correct and totally understood if you just said je joue pas d'un instrument. Maybe like the same thing as in, for example, if you're asked comment ça va, okay? You could use ça va pas ou ça ne va pas. The ne here kind of has a role, as in to indicate that it's a negation, but it's still understandable if you just use pas. And it's something that most people who commonly speak French kind of tend to skip, especially, for example, young people. Okay. All right. Any question about that? So does anybody maybe play an instrument in the class so we can have a affirmation? Nobody? Okay, no problem. So you still have the examples, for example, with moi je joue de la guitare or je joue du piano. Okay? Pas de questions? No questions?
Excusez-moi.
Oui,
Tu joues un peu de piano.
moi?
Je joue
Ah, tu joues. Okay,
un peu
un peu de
de
piano.
piano.
Okay, very good. Okay. So Felix added a frequency, you would say, maybe, kind of an adverb that kind of gives more information. So un peu is a little, okay? Très bien, Félix. Très très bien. Okay. On avance. We're going to move on to what we also saw last time with the expression of taste. Okay, that's something that we are going to continue right now. There's the same verb that is used, the verb aimer. Okay. So as we saw previously, for example, with the word or the verb jouer. So we saw that it had this little categorization with the ER here, okay? And we're going to find that again here with aimer. So what group is the verb aimer? Is it first, second, or third group? Jouer was first group, so aimer is the same thing. It's the first group because there's ER at the end, and it's always pronounced as the same way as it would be pronounced aimer, jouer. Okay. We also have the verb adorer. Okay. So it would be same thing here. Okay. And here you can see that it's the same conjugation as before because we have the root, which is M. You would take off the ending, like the little mark of the first group, so the ER, and then you would use or write complete with the ending that is specific to the verbs of the first group. So if I would read it to you, it would be j'aime. Tu aimes, elle aime, nous aimons, vous aimez, ils aiment. Okay? Something that is not only specific to French as in English it's also done is the little link that you do with, for example, a consonant letter and a vowel letter. So that's why you hear, for example, when I say nous aimons, you kind of hear a Z sound, okay? But that isn't really important for now. Okay? So we saw the expression of loving, liking, disliking, and hating. Okay? So we also saw some specific use of these verbs because those are all verbs, okay? So we have seen j'adore dessiner, okay? You can see that it's the same thing or the same conjugation as the verb aimer because adorer is also a member of the first group. So we know for a fact that that verb is going to be conjugated the same way as j'aimais. So it would be es, ons, ez, and ent. Okay. And you can also see that all those verbs here as our first groups are in the first groups because they end with er. So we know that it's the same conjugation for all those verbs here, okay? So if you were to write those verbs, it would be pretty easy as you have a model, okay? Any question about that for now? Nope, okay. On va s'entraîner. We're going to train a little bit with while we have those models, okay? Moi, ok, moi, j'aime écouter de la musique et je déteste cuisiner. Okay. Something important that I need to highlight. Okay. Et toi, tu aimes quoi? Tu aimes quoi, Sabrina?
Moi, j'aime écouter de la dance.
So écouter, what is the meaning of écouter? So écouter is similar to escuchar, okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
So can be adore,
Mm,
or no?
so you can say either
J'adore.
j'adore,
Moi, j'adore dance,
danser, okay?
danser. Et, je déteste. I don't know.
So think maybe of an activity that you don't like.
Football.
Et je déteste le football, ok?
Le football.
Très bien, ok. Est-ce que tu pourrais demander à quelqu'un d'autre dans la classe? So, could you ask that same question here? Et toi, tu aimes quoi?
Et toi, tu aimes quoi? Bedtime?
J'aime de l'escalade.
J'aime l'escalade. Très bien.
Je n'aime pas danser.
Je n'aime pas danser. Très bien. Okay, very good. Does anyone have some trouble with the vocabulary of the example here? Moi, j'aime écouter de la musique et je déteste cuisiner. Or that is that maybe... Oui. Darling?
Why, if it's j'aime, like I like,
Mhm.
moi means me. So why is it moi j'aime?
Well, because French and English are different, as in it's kind of me or moi here isn't the subject of the sentence. The subject of the sentence here is J apostrophe, okay? So maybe it would be clearer if I typed it this way, okay? That little J, okay? That J here is the pronoun je. But as I've told you previously, French wants to sound good, and to sound good, you can't have, for example, I don't know, for example, two vowel sounds in a row. because je ends with a vowel sound, the vowel sound e, okay, and starts with another vowel sound e, okay. So we wouldn't be able to say je aime. To kind of
Okay.
make it more easy, we would just skip that he part, okay? We don't want to hear it, and we would say simply j'aime, okay? So when you see that little apostrophe, okay, that hyphen, I think it's hyphen in English, maybe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But when you see that little thing here, same thing as in English, you know that it's a contraction of a word.
Okay. I mean that moi is me. So am I saying me, I like something, or is it I still like something or something like that? Like, I mean the literal pronunciation, is it like me, I like this or something like that?
Well, if you were to translate the whole sentence,
Yeah.
it would be kind of untranslatable, as in English you would
Oh,
say
okay.
me I like, you would simply say
Yeah.
I like.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
but that little emphasis here on moi, or for example, et toi, tu aimes quoi? You have the same thing here. You have that kind of repetition of person, okay? But it's
Okay.
something that is very common in French.
And écoutez, what does it mean?
So it's the same structure as English, where for example you have music, okay? You would have to have kind of a so gerund, maybe it's pronounced this way, I don't remember. It's here it's an infinitive verb because it's the kind of activity of the sentence, écouter, listening, okay? So if you would to translate that whole expression, écouter de la musique, it would be listening to music. If
Okay.
you, for example, listening to music is the whole sentence or the whole expression in English. You're not saying that you like music, you're saying that you like listening to music.
Okay. So is it possible for me to say that whole sentence without the moi?
Totally, yeah.
Okay.
But it comes from, for example, if I say et toi,
Okay.
it would be kind of to have a repetition with me. For example, I say toi, you would say moi.
Yeah.
But again, it's not something that you would have to see all the time. It's totally doable without the moi. Okay?
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Des questions là-dessus? Any questions maybe? Any confusion?
No,
Mhm.
not myself.
Très bien. Merci, Sabrina. Oh, yeah. Does anybody understand the word cuisiner?
Kitchen?
It's not
Cooking?
kitchen, it's cooking.
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 Yeah. You have for example, in English, you have the kind of something that you borrowed from French. Well, the word cuisine, okay? The word cuisine in English is a French word. So it basically means cook. Here, cuisiner is cooking, okay? Something that we can talk about here is, for example, the use of that infinitive instead of the ing form in English. Here, for example, cuisiner here as it's the same thing as in English where it would be an ing form, and its grammatical um grammatical signature would be a noun, okay? So cuisiner could be, or cooking could be a subject of a sentence because with the ing form, it could be a noun. Here it's the same thing, but the er, so here it's the same thing as in, for example, the infinitive form. In French, the infinitive form and the gerund is the same thing with like the infinitive. It's much easier in English because you have, for example, a different way to express the infinitive and the gerund with the ing form. Here, you just have to kind of space yourself and recognize that here cuisiner is a gerund because it could be a subject of a sentence. Okay. Bonjour le gars. Okay. Pas de questions? No questions? Yep. Okay. We took a lot of time on that little review, but it made sense to do so. Okay, so we're going to go and look back at the numbers, okay? Because I think that most of you may not know how you would count until 100, okay? Last time, I think that it was 3 classes ago, we talked about the basic numbers from 0 to 10, okay? No problem, Loga, just no problem about it, don't you worry. We haven't started what we need to learn today, so it was just a review of last time. For the numbers from 0 to 11, maybe can someone try to remind me how you would count from, well, 0 to 10 at least?
I could try.
Mhm.
0,
0. Mhm.
1,
So it could be une,
1.
un, okay? Very important. Here, un is masculine, une is feminine, okay?
So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
8. Mhm.
8, 9, 10.
Okay, très bien. So that's basic digits for now. And if we take a look at this table, we can see that it starts similarly as in English, where we have 11, 12, 13, and from 12 we have something that is different than in English. For example, you would say, well, 13, 14, etc. Here it's different. We have 13, okay? So you can kind of see the root of 3, 3, yeah. Same thing here. You can kind of see a root here again, here again. And then it starts to get easier. So we have 10, okay? 7, 10, 8, 10, 9. So it's almost the same thing as you would see, for example, in English with, for example, 13, 14, 15, etc., where you have a root that means like 10, and then you have the the number column, okay, the digit column, so the unity. So you can see here that we have this, and then we go to 20, okay. So here for 20, the T is silent, depending on the region you live in, because same thing in English. French has some variants, okay? So from region to region, you could hear the T. For example, in Belgium, they're very well known to pronounce the T. So if you go to Belgium, they would say vent, where we hear the T. But in, let's say, general French, we wouldn't pronounce the T. But again, if you pronounce the T, it's totally fine. Like, there's no problem with that. So either you pronounce the T or either you don't. It doesn't matter much. However, once we go here, there's something that is very important where you have 21, okay? So that is something that is going to be recurring with like French, starting with the dozens. Yeah, starting with the dozens where you would have to use a, okay? Does anybody know what the word a means?
And
Merci, merci Félix et Nora. Effectivement, c'est and. It's and. That is something that you are going to see at each dozen. For example, for 31, we would say 30 and 1, 30 et 1. For 41, we would say 41. But it's the only number in the dozen you would hear it in. Okay. So as you can see, for example, with the for the 20s, okay, then you don't have a. It's basically 20, 22, 23, 24, 25, etc. Kind of the same thing as in English, where you would like say 21, 22, etc. So it's basically the same way to structure a bigger number. And maybe that once you know until 29, basically if you know every dozen, you can count up to 99 because, well, it's the same repetition over and over. So does anybody know how you would say 30, 40, 50, 60, and on and on? Any idea maybe? Nope. No.
40 yeah, it's kind of the same as Spanish.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's almost the same as, well, Spanish and French share a common root in Latin, okay? So for example, in Spanish, what would you say?
40 is 40.
40, okay.
Uh-huh.
In
And
French,
it's
it's,
40.
so it's almost
40.
the same thing. Well, it's the Q and U is the same pronunciation in English and Spanish, where you would say qu, kind of have that W sound, qu. For example, in Spanish, you would say cuarenta, okay? Or maybe in English, you would say quadruple. Here, it's a K sound, okay? So it's basically as if you would hear a K. It's 40. Same thing here. It's not 50. It's 50, okay? And on and on and on. So it's easy until 60, okay? 60. Because, well, it can be that easy, unfortunately, okay? Because, well, somebody thought that it would be fun to kind of do some additions while you're counting. So you have 60, then you move on to 70. Okay, so if you were basically to do some additions, 60 plus 10, 60 plus 10 is 70, so that makes 70. Then you have 80. Okay, so basically 20 is 20, 4 is 4, so 4 times 20, that makes 80, 80. And for just for fun, you have also 90. Okay, so that time you do ben de rien, mais Félix, pas de souci. Passe une bonne journée, bon rendez-vous. Have a good rendezvous, okay? So here, instead of doing like maybe like you would say, for example, with like 9, 10 peut-être, you could say 9, 10. But it isn't that easy. So you would do like, for example, 4 times 20 plus 10, 90. And then for 3, we have 100. Okay? So not as easy as English for the 20s, 30s, 40s, and on and on. So starting from 60, you have those variations that are really special and kind of uncommon. Okay. Does anyone want to try to give it a go and try to pronounce every dozen? Somebody wants to try or wants maybe to hear me say 30, 40. Okay. Well, I'll read it anyway. So we have 30, 40, 50, 60. Okay. So the X here isn't pronounced as an X, it's pronounced as an S. So we have 60, 70, okay? 80, 90, and 100, okay? 100. So,
Adriel, can
oui.
you repeat the 50?
50 is 50, okay?
50, okay.
The C has 2 sounds in French. You have either the K sound and the S sound. In this case, it's the S sound because it's 50. And for those of you who are maybe curious about, well, if it's the same thing as before for the 20s, for example, where you'd say 21, 22, 23, etc., we would say the same thing because, for example, if I go look like 90, 90, we would say 91. So different. We would say 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, and then 100. Okay. So a lesson to be learned here. If you see that little this, okay, you would pronounce it the same way as you would pronounce from 11 to 19, okay? Where you would say 91, 92, 93, 94, etc. Same thing for those two. Okay, so for 70 and 90. So the rule here is that when you see this, be sure to count as if it was like from 11 to 19. However, for all of the others, it's the same thing as, for example, 21. You would have like 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, etc. Okay. Des questions peut-être? Questions, maybe? Any remarks? Something to ask? Or does that seem clear for all of you? No questions? Okay, so we're going to be able to move on. So again, for the numbers in general, it's not something that we take for granted for now, okay? So that's something that we're going to have to look up again and again, because it's not going to be easy, because it's a little bit trickier than in English, for example. Okay, so I was searching or thinking about how we could exercise so those numbers from well 10 to 99, okay? So I thought about, for example, the phone numbers. So we're going to look at, for example, for now, we're going to look at those questions, and then we're going to try to read those numbers, okay? So I think that Joanna, you're in France. Bella, you're in France. Donna, you're in France, okay? Nora, I'm not sure if you're in France. Okay. Loga, I'm not sure if you're in France. Sabrina, you're not in France, and Bethan, you're not in France, but you're coming to France soon. So for those of you who are already in France, I'm very sure that you are aware of what's the French indicative, l'indicatif téléphonique, okay? So does anyone know what's the, so for those of you, or maybe if I didn't translate it right, the indicatif téléphonique is the little numbers you have after the plus. So for example, the indicatif téléphonique of the US is plus 1, plus 1, okay? Plus 1. Does anybody know what's the French indicatif téléphonique? Quel est l'indicatif téléphonique français?
Plus
Trois,
33.
trois.
That's 33.
It's, so we'll try in French, okay? However, we wouldn't say plus 33. It's correct, but we would say plus 33, as Loga said. So how would we say 33 in French? I'll put up the table here. So for 30, we say 30. For 33, we would say
33.
33. Très bien, Nora. Merci beaucoup. Okay, so l'indicatif téléphonique français est plus 33. Et dans votre pays, what is pays?
Country.
Yeah, country. Maybe it was a bit easier for you, Sabrina, because it's almost the same thing as in Spanish. Pays, país, okay. So, et dans votre pays, donc for Bethan, en Angleterre, c'est quoi l'indicatif téléphonique?
44, so 44.
44, ok, très bien. Loga, c'est quoi l'indicatif téléphonique? If you remember, what is the phone indicative?
Plus 60.
Plus 60, ok, très bien. Maybe for those of you who still remember what's their indicative, quels sont leurs indicatifs téléphoniques chez eux, Sabrina, what's the indicatif téléphonique d'Espagne?
30. 4.
34? Ok, très bien. Donc l'indicatif espagnol, c'est 34. Ok. Très très bien, merci beaucoup. Maintenant, on va penser à comment est-ce qu'on lit les numéros. The verb here, lit, isn't the word lit. It's not bed in French. So for example, lit and lit. So those two words aren't the same thing, even though they're pronounced as like the same thing. Okay, it's lit et lit. The first one, you could say that it's the bed, and the second one is a verb. Does anybody know what verb is? Lit, lire. It's
To read.
to read, yeah. Lire, okay? So the infinitive version of lit is lire, okay? So, starting off with Baffen, comment est-ce que tu lis les numéros de téléphone en Angleterre? Comment c'est how, okay? So how would you read the English phone numbers, for example?
What do you mean?
Because, for example, in France, so as you can see on the right, we have the packets of two, okay? So for example, if I say the first one, it would be 05 44 66 08 28. Alors, I don't know about English numbers, how they are kind of separated. So maybe you can enlighten us about how they're kind of read or even written.
To be honest, if you have your phone number,
Mhm.
you would probably. Some people say it differently. Some people break them up like 05, 44, but some people just like how I would do it, how most people do it, is you just read every number as its own.
Okay,
So it would be 544660828.
okay. Well, that is very different from French. Well, for French numbers, I think that it's the same thing as maybe in America, where we would say like 505, 123, etc. Here we have, for example, with a French number, okay? So it's different from the two starting numbers. So I'm not sure about England or about other countries, but the two first numbers in a French telephone number is the region in France. So for example, where I live, the starting would be 05, okay? So for example, 05 is when you're in Charente-Maritime, which is like in the west of France. So depending on the region, this number will change, okay? You wouldn't say just 5 because you have to hear the first number because, well, it's a phone number, so it's very important that you pronounce or that you hear every number, even though it's only 8, okay? So the two starting numbers are important to know because they're like the indicative of a specific region in France. I believe that in Paris it's 0101. Because well, that's how most things work in France, where it's all about Paris. Ok. Donc, qui est-ce qui pourrait lire les trois numéros ici? On va faire un par un, so we'll do one by one. Who is interested in reading the first number? Anybody willing to give it a go?
I will try the first one.
Merci, Loga. Je t'écoute.
05
Mhm.
44
Très bien.
66
Mhm.
08 28.
Très bien. Okay. Very good. Another thing about French number is their length. So, for example, it's a, well, eight digit phone number, because the first two are the indicative fixed phone number, so like a home telephone, if you will. So here, very important, the French numbers are 8 digits. Okay. Does anybody know what's the first two numbers for a French mobile phone?
06.
06, oui, très bien. So if you see a 06, it's a French mobile phone. Here it's only like domestic phones, which aren't really used anymore, besides, well, telephone companies. So most likely like some scams that you receive from domestic phones like that. Pour le deuxième numéro, so for the second one, le second numéro, qui peut lire? Who can read the second number? Nobody? Okay, I'll give it a go. Okay, alors c'est 02 86 92 69 76. Okay, so that one was a little bit tricky because there's two important numbers here. 92, so not to be confused with 82. Okay, this is 92 and 76. Okay. Et le dernier qui pourrait lire le dernier numéro de téléphone. Who could read the last phone number, please?
I can
Joanna?
try. Yeah.
Merci.
0 0 3 44
44.
60 63
63, très bien.
63 01 30 37.
37, très bien, super. Merci beaucoup, Joanna. So here, you can see that, for example, with the 1, as I've told previously, well, the neutral gender in French is the masculine. So you wouldn't say 01, mais 01, because, well, it's neutral. Okay. Any question about numbers for now? Nope. So thanks.
I have one quick question.
Oui.
For the second phone number, you said that 76 was a special number.
Yeah,
Why is
76
that?
and 92. Like, it's not a special number as in it means something special. It's just the pronunciation is different.
Okay.
As we saw, okay. So for example, for the 70s and 90s, when you see numbers that end with the 10, okay, you would count it not as, for example, 70 et 1, 70 et 2. You would take the pattern from 11 to 19. So
Okay.
71, 72, 73, etc. So it's special in the way that it's kind of tricky. So those two numbers are kind of tricky to use. and to learn in general.
Okay.
Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. De rien. Okay. Okay, ben, merci d'avoir participé. I don't think that we'll do a pause because, well, there's still like 10 minutes for the class, so I think that we'll rush by it, that we will not have time to finish completely, which is okay. We'll do it later on. Okay. As I've told you at the beginning of the class, we're going to talk about the colors. Okay. Can anybody see the colors that are displayed here on the screen? Yeah. Okay. So does everybody is kind of comfortable with the colors in French, sort of? Okay. So what we are going to be focused on here is the gender of the colors, okay? So, quel est le genre des couleurs? What's the gender of the colors here?
Masculine.
Masculine or neutral. But to be totally like to be non-confusing, we will say masculine, okay? So it's masculine. Here the grammatical class is a noun, okay? So a color can either be a noun, but also can be an adjective. How would we recognize an adjective in French? Is that if, or not an adjective, a noun, is we have the article here, le or la. Okay? So because we have le, we know that it's a noun. Okay? Does anybody want to give it a go? Maybe for the first line of the colors, or do you want me to read them to you?
I can try.
Ok, je t'écoute, Sabrina, merci.
Okay. So I saw le noir,
Le noir, mhm.
le blanc, le bleu, le
Le
vert,
bleu, mhm.
le vert.
Le vert. Ok, très bien. Really well pronounced. Mute letters again. So not the noir, but the le blanc. Okay. We don't hear the final letter. And something that we can discuss about, for example, is why we have those letters. So it's a little bit hard to explain, but because nouns have can have multiple genders, can be multiple gendered, especially if they're adjectives. That's something that we're going to look at later, is that there needs to be a little way to add certain letters. So for example, to add the plural or to add the feminine version. So for example, we're going to look at later, but those letters are very useful to add those specifics, okay? Je vais lire la suite. On a le rouge, le jaune, l'orange, okay? So even though it's L hyphen, it's still le, okay? L'orange, le violet, le rose, le beige, le marron et le gris, okay? As you can see, many mute letters, okay? I'm not going to be highlighting every letter, but you can see that it's very different from English, where you would pronounce every letter in a word, or almost every letter. Okay, So I think that we're going to finish off with this because it's il est 14h25, donc il faut qu'on se dépêche. Alors, quelles sont tes couleurs préférées? Ok. Ou quelles sont les couleurs que tu n'aimes pas? So we're going to talk for like each at a time, ok? Donc je commence par Bethan, ok? Quelles sont tes couleurs préférées?
Moi, préféré le bleu et
Hmm. Qu'est-ce que tu as dit? What did you say?
le bleu.
Okay. Could you try to make the whole sentence again?
Do you want to like I like or
No, that would be a good answer. Je préfère, ok. C'était très bien.
tu préfères le bleu et le vert?
Je préfère le bleu et le vert. Très bien, ok. Merci, Beth. Est-ce que tu peux poser la question à quelqu'un d'autre? Could you ask the question to someone else?
Donna, quelles sont tes couleurs préférées?
Je préfère les jaune.
Très bien.
Okay. Bethan. One second, I have to go back.
Try to do
Bethan,
someone else.
quelles sont tes couleurs préférées?
Donna, can you ask the question to someone else as Bethan already did it?
Oh, sorry.
Pas de problème, no
I thought.
problem. Yeah, no problem.
Jo Oliveira. Quelles sont tes couleurs préférées?
J'adore le rose.
Très bien. Ok.
Bella, quelles sont tes couleurs préférées?
J'aime bien les roses aussi.
Très bien.
Sabrina, quelles sont tes couleurs préférées?
J'adore les roses et beige. Le
Beige,
beige.
très bien. Très bien.
Je ne sais pas les
Je n'aime
marrons.
pas.
Je
Ok,
n'aime pas les marrons.
très bien. Ok. Est-ce que tu peux demander
Mm,
à quelqu'un d'autre?
who is missing?
Nora and Loga.
Okay. Nora, quelles sont tes couleurs préférées?
Fleur. Mhm.
J'aime le noir et le rose. Le rouge.
Rouge, oui. Très bien.
Rouge. Loka, quelles sont tes couleurs préférées?
Je préférais le noir aussi.
Très bien. Ok. Ok. Merci beaucoup. Ok. So il est presque 14h30. Okay. So it's almost 2:30. So the end of the class. If you have any questions, now is the time. So about anything that we saw today and before, if you have any questions, you can ask me now. Does anybody have a question about the class that we did see? Yep.
This isn't about this class, but I missed the Thursday class last week and I couldn't see the class in the recordings yet.
So I put the recording yesterday, so you may be able to watch
Oh,
the
okay.
recording. Now I also put the presentation, so you can see both on the Google Drive that will keep updated
Okay, perfect.
Let's move on.
Thank
So
you.
it's
Merci.
like a good question. So for anybody who will miss a class, they can always check the Google Drive, which will have the presentations and also the recordings of the classes.
Mm,
Hello,
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Because me too, I missed the Thursday class, so
no problem. You can always feel free to check out the Google Drive. If somebody didn't receive, maybe by, I don't know, accident or they lost the mail, you can always reach out to me and I'll send the link again. Okay. Otherwise, does anybody have a question about the class, more specifically, or something else maybe? No questions? Okay. So, well, merci d'être venu. Thank you for coming in. So, as you may see, we didn't do everything that I had prepared, but that's okay. We'll start it over next time. Okay. So hopefully we'll be able to finish it by Thursday. Okay. So for the persons who are here, does anybody are still available for Thursday's class? Yeah. Okay. If you aren't available or something comes up, no problem. Try maybe to warn me by email beforehand, if you're able to, as it would be good for me to kind of get a hold of some of, kind of get me an idea of how many people are going to be present for Thursday's class. So again, if you have any question, you can write me an email. No problem. I'll answer as soon as I can. Okay. Well, if you don't have any more question, I'll let you go. Merci beaucoup d'être venu. Merci, merci. Et on se voit jeudi. Okay. We'll see each other on Thursday. All right.
See you.
merci,
Merci beaucoup.
Adriel.
Merci, bonne
Bye.
journée.
Une bonne journée. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir, Loga. Au revoir, Bella. Au revoir, Sabrina. Passez une bonne journée.